Well, hello and welcome to Beyond the Sermon, a Bethany podcast, where we have the privilege of digging deeper into our Sunday messages. I'm Tammy DeLau, and today I'm joined with Pastor David Baxley and Pastor Steve Musto. And guys, we are in week 6 of our series, The Upside Down Kingdom. So I know these flyovers really are for me because I'm doing interviews and doing things today, and I just need to know where we are before we get started.
Oh, we need it too.
You need it too.
Don't understand.
I mean, that's what Dave or Steve said, that it did help him too.
Yeah,
so that's
I love
good.
it.
That's awesome. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at is we are in a kingdom. It's upside down. It looks different from the world. We are walking through the Sermon on the Mount, which is Matthew chapter 5 through 7. I love it as a host, guys, because I've been saying chapter 5 week after week. I think we're going to move to 6 eventually. Eventually, we'll get there.
In a couple weeks.
Okay. So we started with what people know as the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes are not do these things and then you'll be blessed. The Beatitudes are what we look like as Christ followers. So I won't go through the whole list, but things like poor in spirit, humble, peacemakers, those are the things that we should have. And now people have been accusing Jesus of not following the law, that he came to either abolish it or forget about it or not take it seriously. And we've got Jewish people that love the law, or at least pretended to love the law, if we're honest. And Jesus is not only loves the law, he is showing the heart behind the law. So last week, he's saying things like, you have heard it said, but I say. And so last week we looked at anger and murder. And this week, bless you, this is a topic, I feel so bad. Pastor David is going to be walking us through God's heart, specifically in adultery and divorce. And I know we have people sitting in our listening audience on a Sunday, maybe watching us right now, that those two things have been a part of their life. And there's wounds and there's pain. Sure. And so we want God's heart to be seen in this. We are not trying to rub anyone's nose in mistakes that have been made. We are not trying to spank anyone, but we want them to see God's heart, the reason for marriage, the beauty of marriage.
Well, when Jesus was teaching this, he was also teaching it to people that were living with the same type of potential shame.
That's good.
So it's not like Jesus was preaching to a room of people who had it all together and somehow to us. He was teaching this for a reason. They had missed it. They had missed God's heart. And what do we know about Jesus? He came, and when he brought teachings like this, we know this. He said, I didn't come to condemn the world, but to save it. And in that, how does he save us? He heals us. He heals us of sin. He heals us of the past. And not only heals, redeems. So we have to look at some of these, and especially these harder ones, and say, not only does God want to heal the wounds and the shame and the pain that goes with that, but redeem it and begin to turn the story around into something that becomes a testimony.
So we do have people who have been in some way impacted by divorce or by adultery, and one of the things that let me just kind of give it a little perspective here on one piece of that, and that is if anybody is the perpetrator of one of those, that's where the shame comes in, whether it was before we trusted Christ or after.
Right.
Yeah. If we're the ones who perpetrated the divorce, if we're the ones who perpetrated the adultery, there's a shame that goes along with that. And to that, I want to say, their messages have been preached. I've preached messages on getting rid of shame and how to be forgiven and everything else. But if that's true of you, and if you believe that you've been forgiven of those things, well, you don't need to wear the scarlet letter of divorce, or the literal scarlet letter. The story is about a woman who commits adultery and has to wear the A on her chest, and that idea. If we've been redeemed, then I would encourage you, don't be ashamed of your story either, because now it's an example of what God has done in your life. And don't let it be your story or your failure. Let it be about God's redemption. And so in the right moments, in the right places, allow that story to come out and give God the glory for what he has done. If it's a secret, if no one can ever talk about it or ever bring it up, or it's always a constant wound, my question is then, has that really been dealt with? Are you really Have you really been forgiven? Have you accepted that you've been forgiven? Or are you still carrying this around? Because there are a lot of people who are walking around with that shame and that guilt.
And I think it's such a ploy of the evil one. I know I had met with someone recently, precious, but is still trying so hard to do all of the right things for God and not feeling good enough. And it's not about us, it's about God. And so there is freedom and redemption.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and read the passage you're going to preach on, David. And I can't wait to have a great discussion with you too. So you will be in Matthew chapter 5, surprise, and verses 27 through 32. You have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out, throw it away, for it is better to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away, for it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife must give her a written notice of divorce. But I tell you, everyone who divorces his wife, except in the case of sexual immorality, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Okay. I really do feel sorry for you. So I will be praying for you, friend. This is hard stuff.
Okay, let's start with this, because whenever I read this, I'm always very aware. This is completely one-sided.
Yes.
He is speaking to men about women.
Yep.
There is no admonition here on the part of women to men. So can you talk a little bit about that and why that is? Why is Jesus only talking to men in this instance?
Because we're perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's a piece I've looked at several times over the years. I've wrestled with that, and a lot of it goes all the way back to the law itself. When the law was originally written, as family structures were put in place, the power to both act on for marriage was in the hands of a man. The power to act to initiate that relationship in marriage was in the hands of a man. The power for divorce was in the hands of the man. And so going back to the law, in a sense, what they're speaking to here is the original power dynamic that exists in culture. And though that we've seen that shift and rights and freedoms in our own country and old world, if we come back to who it was written to, Jesus' original audience, he was writing to people where there was the balance wasn't as we know it. And so he was speaking specifically, as Jesus does a lot in his ministry, to those with power. And he is restoring. Part of what he was doing is to both restore that, but then call to account for those that have that. This is how you practice God's divine calling on your life, set apart with the power that you have in your society or culture,
And to use that power for good, not evil.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I'm glad you did the hard one. So I'll give you another reason.
Yeah,
why.
good, please.
It's really easy. He's speaking to the disciples.
Oh, okay.
They're all men. So that's not
Okay.
Jesus knows his audience. He's talking to an audience.
Okay.
So who's in the audience right now? This is who's in his audience, and so that's another piece. But
Yeah, no, it's a really reasonable
you are
point.
right. Yeah. You are absolutely right that everything was written from so they didn't have the breakdown like we do in their minds. They didn't have a breakdown in communication when it came to gender. Everything was written just for ease. Everything was done in the male, addressed to males.
Yes.
And they just sort of parsed it in their minds of, we understand that this part of it applies to men, and this part of it applies to women, and this part of it applies to little kids.
Yeah.
And they just sort of did that work. But there was no delineation of men here, women here. They just, when they were doing injunctions and laws and all that stuff, they just didn't think about it.
Well, it's hard when you have parchment and ink, and so it's
Yeah.
way easier.
No, I'm glad you spoke to that, because I think that makes the next part of our conversation even feel more
Easier.
easier and yet messy at the same time.
But if I'm remembering correctly, yes, he was speaking to them, But people were interested and they were
Yeah,
coming around.
people started
So
coming around.
there
Yeah.
probably were females in that audience then, correct?
There may have been, but that was not the point of the talk.
Okay.
And so this is what's hard about being a communicator sometimes is you always want to know who your audience is. And then on more than one occasion, I have, this is who you're talking to, and been like, great. And I've gotten in the room and I've looked around and gone, that is not who I'm talking to.
Okay.
They either don't know their audience or people got added at the last minute or whatever. And now I have to, in my mind, I'm going to have to change maybe some things, or some of the illustrations I had thought about are not going to work. And Jesus is he's talking to his
So
his
the summary of
disciples.
that, it's important to recognize Jesus in this, what appears to be a gender-focused narrative, is not making a separation, a dual standard. Here's a standard for men. We'll come back and talk women later. He is speaking to all of those who are followers of Christ as he gets into this.
So last week we're talking about murder, but at the end of the day, it wasn't about murder. It was about anger or
what
hate
leads
or
to-
hatred.
what leads to
yes,
murder.
what leads to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the same thing we could say. Oh, we're talking about adultery, but what leads to adultery is really what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is, for me, I grew up in the church. I was born in it as a teenager. And so as a young man in the church, this was a section of scripture that I can say I heard a lot growing up. And specifically, as Jesus is dealing with, as we've already been talking about, what's in our hearts, specifically in the area of lust. And that shift from, you've heard it, shifting from adultery to what we do outwardly to what is happening inwardly, is a pretty powerful image because of what you just said. But it's not just what leads to adultery. I think what makes lust such a powerful conversation is that even without ever getting to adultery, lust has so much power on our hearts and on our relationships that we don't realize the effect. I think when we think of adultery, we often think of, look at the people it's involving, the man, the woman, if it's a family, how it affects the kids, whatever it is. We can create this narrative with lust that I'm the only one that this affects. And yet the world I grew up in, even though, let's focus on the male narrative for a moment, it was often centered at young men I was growing up to, but there was something wrong with that narrative. And they began to shift that narrative often. I remember sitting in places and hearing this, whereas they would tell men not to lust, they would almost just hit this comment at them, and then they would begin to change the narrative, and they would begin to start speaking to women. And as they would speak to women, they would begin, I can remember these stories. They would begin to blame women for the battle of men as they would begin to tell them how to dress and how to act and how to talk and begin to say, and don't go into this room and don't do this thing. And
Under the guise of you can help men with
yeah,
this.
yes. And I didn't see it happening in time, which is I think what makes me so sad now, because I can think back and I imagine my own sister. And I remember we were in rooms at the same time, and the narrative she heard was a game of blame and shame on her for the fact that there were guys in the room that, at least in that point in the conversation, weren't managing their own thoughts in their mind and their hearts of how they viewed sexuality and how they viewed women. And then the women around them were being told, hey, you need to fix this problem by changing how you act and what you do. And I that is a part of the reason I know from talking to my own sister that she is not an evangelical believer anymore. That was a major factor of this separation that was made, that I think has destroyed not only the heart of this text, but totally turned into almost an abusive narrative toward women when it comes to this topic of lust.
There's a name for that. We've given a name to that in the last several years, and that is those of us who grew up in what is called purity.
That's right.
Culture.
That's right.
That it was all about purity, and so there are a lot of pieces of this. There were promise rings I promise to remain a virgin till I get married, and you'd wear a ring, and that would signify that. There's I kiss dating goodbye. You know, the whole idea of we're not going to date and
Until we're ready to be married.
until we're ready to be married. And but by far, I think the biggest damage feels like it was done in the teaching of this.
That's right.
I don't know how many youth groups I was in where they would separate the boys and the girls, and I don't know what the girls got told, but I know what the boys got told, and the boys got told. Really, the message that was conveyed to us is that women are dangerous. Women are dangerous to your spiritual life and
to your purity.
Yeah, and if you're not careful, they are going to take you out. So, I'm curious.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
Well,
What it was like.
I had already apologized to all of my children because I was a mom when the purity culture was a big deal, and several of my children did receive rings. Like, we did all of the things. And so first I want to acknowledge at the end of the day, you want your child to be pure and to not enter a marriage with 10 people they've been to bed with, because we know you take those people into your relationship. And so I think at the heart of what we wanted as parents was we wanted what we thought was the best, but we were focusing on virginity, not hearts that follow Jesus. And so that's
good.
at the end of the
Tammy.
day,
That's good,
that
yes.
has been my apology to my children. And so, but I think what was communicated and what I indirectly communicated, there were a couple things. First of all, we taught our sons that women were weaker. They weren't, there was something there about that they were stronger men. I think I did that even in the whole being gallant thing. And so that's one thing I've apologized, raising children in that season. But the other thing is holding our girls responsible for a man's heart, and that's not fair. And so I had a daughter with long legs, and if she was wearing a pair of shorts, they were going to look shorter on her than her friend that was 5'2". And that was not fair. I mean, those things were not fair. And so I've been made to feel like we're a temptress, we're evil. Our desire is to cause you brothers to sin, to stumble. And that's never been part of the equation. And so somehow we were yoked with your hearts, and that was not fair.
Isn't that awful?
Yeah, yeah. And so
I just, I've said this a million times to so many people. I'm just so sorry that has been a burden that I don't know how to apologize to all women of all time, but I feel that very much. Having raised a daughter and having two sisters, I see that, and I totally acknowledge that, because instead of holding men responsible, instead of holding boys responsible, we made it we gave into the idea that somehow girls were incurable temptresses who would
they were a
lure
virus
us
that you were
away.
going to catch.
Yeah.
And as a woman, it's been hard if I have talked to other men and they will not give me eye contact. There's a looking down.
Yeah.
That feels so degrading and so disrespectful. And so those kind of choices have been made under the guise of I'm going to protect my marriage. I'm going to put a hedge around my marriage. I am not going to fall. And I'm not trying to cause a brother. Does that make sense? And so that feels really, really yucky.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I grew up, my dad worked for Billy Graham. There's this thing called the Billy Graham rule.
Oh, right.
It's actually a set of rules where, Billy Graham was never alone in a room with a woman. He was never rode in an elevator with just he and a woman who was not his wife. This has been expanded to never rode in a car with a woman. This has been expanded to many different things. And this is what I was taught as a young pastor that I had to follow. Yeah. And I think I followed it for years, just for years. Like you don't, be in the same room. Don't be in a room with just you and a woman. It's just not smart. Don't do it. And we've all been in situations where there's somebody in a crisis. And several years ago, I just went, I can't serve our church.
Yeah.
And say, I'm sorry, I can't be in a room with you because Billy Graham or somebody else couldn't be in a room with some woman. That's ridiculous to me. And I don't want to walk around looking at women that way. I don't want to see women as, I think in some ways, if we're saying is let's stop objectifying women, what is more objectifying than just assuming that any woman that you're in a room with is going to tear down your reputation? It's like the most objectifying thing you can do.
Right.
And so in the name of trying not to objectify them, we made it so much worse.
I totally objectified women in doing that. Absolutely. Wow.
So,
But now I'm going to play devil's advocate.
yeah,
with you,
and I will too. Go
because
ahead.
somebody's going to say, but Steve, you are supposed to avoid the appearance of evil.
Yeah. So here's what Kathy and I have said and done. There is wisdom in not having, I will not have lunch, like you and I have never been to lunch together, just the two of us or anything
Never.
like that, as you have pointed out.
In fact, well,
in our
yeah, I mean,
podcast.
inviting everyone to lunch, I wanted David and I go to lunch with
Right.
David.
So we would not do that. And the reason I won't have lunch with a woman I'm not related to, just the two of us, is specifically because of other people.
Right.
Because that does cause people to walk by our table who are part of Bethany and go, hey, what is going on there? And it ends up being a distraction or a distraction to the gospel or something that makes people question my integrity or something like that. So I wouldn't do that. If on the rare occasion that I've had to, circumstances have dictated that I would ride in the car, give somebody a ride somewhere or something like that because they don't have any other way, I call Kathy first. I just say, hey, if it would be you, I would say, hey, Tammy's car is being repaired. There's nobody else here. I'm going to give Tammy a ride down to the shop. And Kathy would say, okay. And then I would drop you off and I would call her again. Just say, okay, dropped her off. Just wanted you to know. And the whole reason is that if anybody saw us riding in the car together and then said to Kathy, hey, I saw Steve riding in the car with Tammy, there's no question, there's no issue. Kathy says, I know about that. And that takes all of that away. That is the only piece of the Billy Graham rule that I've kind of held on to.
Okay, that's good.
You know, something Amy and I began years ago is learning to know that where I, in multiple friendships, relationships, ministry over the years, where I can't quite see where there could be a risk in a certain situation or relationship, my wife has great discernment. She can often see a situation that could be viewed something that way, or even someone like that's just, there's something there, you don't quite know them well enough, that it's nothing to do with you or even a gender, but just there's something there. And so we have the veto rule, and that is that I just won't be alone with anybody. Amy says, don't do that with that person. Just don't do that with that person. That's just ride in the car. And it's all the way when, I was first doing ministry at the last church, I would call and have those conversations. And that also evolved into people we had regular relationship with on both sides, that veto rule. Because my wife, she was a vice president at a bank. She was traveling. She was having to move between office. She was having to be in the car sometimes with other people she worked with, coworkers, men. And so we just said, we're just going to be open, but we trust each other. And we're going to but if there's a flag for either of us, we're just going to communicate it so that we fight to help protect each other and our own relationship.
Let's talk. Yeah, I want to dig into this a little bit more because just again, we're missing something. So several years ago, I was going to a meeting at church, and there were a group of us, 3 or 4 guys. We were all good friends. And it was before the meeting started. We were waiting for everybody else to get there, but just the 4 of us who were good friends were sitting in the room. And one of the guys said, we're going away this weekend. My wife and I are going away, kind of a romantic getaway, and his first time doing this without kids. And one of the other guys made a comment about, hey, nice, without kids, like swing from the chandeliers. It was a very obvious comment that he was saying it's great.
Something was being implied.
Something was being implied.
Something
Yeah,
was,
you guys
yes.
are going to have a good time. And I made I had a visceral reaction where I went like, ew.
Yeah.
And nobody saw it. But afterwards, I was just like, Lord, what in the world was that? What was that visceral reaction? Because here's the reality. This is my friend. I know that he and his wife have sex in their marriage, and his wife is beautiful. And she's very attractive. I would say, she's like my type of person. Why did I have this reaction of the thought of this beautiful thing that God created, sex in marriage? What was it? And I realized I was responding to, I couldn't think of her that way because we were in such close relationship. We had done vacations together and our kids were friends and we'd done holidays with them, all kinds of stuff. That thinking of her in a sexualized way was like thinking of my sister in that way. And I just went, oh,
Yeah,
yuck.
I love that. Yes.
And that for me was like the light bulb went off. And I said, wait a second, we're withdrawing from community with each other in the interest of being safe. And I think the opposite is often true, where the answer is deeper community. Because if I love
So good, Steve.
someone
Amen.
enough, I'm not going to want to blow up their marriage. I'm not going to want to wound that person in that way. And I stop seeing this dear sister in Christ as a sexual object there for gratification. And I start seeing her who God made her to be.
It's beautiful.
That seems like more of the answer than let's keep away from each other. Let's go deeper in community with each other.
That's good. Because the truth is, I guess, I don't know if we can go back and do a test, but since we've had purity culture and we've had Billy Graham rules, have there been more affairs? Have there been more temptation? I do wonder if it's
I look
it's
around,
like not taking the cookie out of the cookie jar. Something about it is more, we've made it.
Absolutely. I look around at my world, at our world and the ministry world. I don't see a drop off in pastors that are fallen. And to that now, we have to add this other piece that we've never really understood before. And that is the power dynamic. The imbalance of power is so great. So many affairs and whatever that happened in marketplace or in the church are not equals in power. One person has more power over somebody else, and I don't even know if you can call that an affair. At some point, abuse comes in where you don't really have the ability anymore to say no to something.
So on that same idea of power, I want to go to another one. We don't talk about this one as much, but as I grew in my marriage, I began to see how this was also being talked about in such a destructive way. Even after people get married, we tend to also create this purity narrative around sex. And I remember this was said at a conference. I was sitting next to my wife, and I remember hearing this great speaker say this: well, women, if you don't want your husband to have an affair and look around, make sure you keep him sexually satisfied.
Yeah.
And you talk about power. What was meant to be this mutual partnership of coming together, all of a sudden was in one stupid statement was destroyed. And one person became the one that this is for me. And the other person said, well, I guess this is for them. And the intimacy, the closeness, and again, what maybe had existed in singleness, and we talked about this, how we look objectified, all of a sudden happened again. Where all it became was an object of satisfaction, not of love and intimacy and closeness and oneness.
There was even a movement out there not that long ago where you were supposed to have sex with your husband like every day.
I remember that.
And that, gross. I mean, I love intimacy, but then it just becomes like something to check off of a to-do list, not a sweet time between a husband and wife. So.
You know all this. sex is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for us to talk about. It's why many of us, we had parents or grandparents or whatever that never brought it up with us. And because it's difficult. This is tough to talk about when it comes to even within marriage. Sex can be hard to talk about. So outside of it, it certainly is. But the inventor of sex talks about it.
Yes.
And we've got to be able and willing to talk about it and to talk about it in a healthy way. But I just don't believe that God, do we have responsibilities to each other? We do.
Yes.
We have responsibility to treat each other well. But do I believe God's intent is really for one gender to be put upon and for the other, so that the other one can rise up? No, I don't see that anywhere in Scripture.
Yeah. So super hard, because as women, we're told, keep the men safe, it's your fault. And then as wives, you're told, if they're going to stumble, it's your fault to keep them happy.
Right.
So
Yes.
We still have this narrative, though, Tammy, where how many times, look,
I know.
we hear about an affair.
Huh.
We hear about an affair, and it's like there's a part of us that looks at the spouse and who is blameless in this, but we look at the spouse and it's like, well, I guess there's something going on there that they weren't satisfied at home enough, I
Yes.
guess.
Yes.
And to that I say, no. No, you allowed wickedness to enter your heart. Judas at some point had to open his heart to what Satan was doing. You allowed that wickedness to creep in. You didn't have the strength to kill it. You did. David, King David, standing on his balcony, allowing a glance to become a look, to become a sweaty leer, to become action. Look, you didn't have the holiness to shut that down. Don't turn around and then blame somebody
right.
else because your
right.
your relationship with Jesus was not what it needed to be, and you were afraid to confess. And instead, we've made it about what the women are not doing, and it just it's just awful. It's awful.
Well, the hard part, we sit in this, we're having this conversation, and I feel this tension of, well, we got to resolve this. We got to resolve this. And the truth is, this is sitting in front of us still. Like, there are homes, we know there are people listening to this that are saying, yep, this is how I feel. Yep, this is what I'm going through. And
there are people listening to us that are saying, let's follow the Billy Graham rules. Like, those are still being held.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's just go back so we don't ever, screw up. And at least for me, the thing I at least feel I would want to say, Steve, you said this earlier, but just, I am so sorry to moms and wives and daughters and sisters who have been spoken to in such a way that they have become the objects of blame for the sin of others.
Yeah.
And if only we can say that to at least start that part of a conversation, and to maybe begin to at least say there's a place for healing and for a new beginning.
You know what I want to say, though, too? I want to say I'm sorry. I would want to say I'm sorry to the men who've been robbed of relationship and depth of relationship. I have some beautiful friendships with women.
That's good, Steve.
Who have taught me so many things, and we've had wonderful conversations. And one of them is sitting next to me, and we can have those conversations and say difficult things to each other, and there's a richness to that relationship that we have stolen from generations of men and women. We've stolen the richness and the depth of what God, so many people, I wonder, it's one of those when we get, we see Jesus face to face, and he says, I wish you had had the depth of relationship with my daughters or with my sons that you could have had. And doggone it, we've missed out on. I missed out on it for years, and it's heartbreaking.
I feel like this is like a I'm sorry fest we're having, but I'm sorry for buying into a culture where I didn't really look at what it was,
Yeah.
and that I could have done better. And so for the areas where I have caused wounds, I feel great pain for that. So, but the beauty is today's a new day,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
we have our tomorrows ahead of us. So that is exciting. So
Oh, and by the way, you're also talking about divorce. As part of that. We didn't even get to that, but
no.
have fun with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
your support in this endeavor.
Well, and we were talking about men and men lusting, but in all fairness, we are seeing that our sisters are lusting too.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to pornography, it's not just a man problem anymore,
No.
it's a female problem.
They're the fastest growing.
Yeah.
Women are the fastest growing consumers of pornography.
And I guess for everything we've talked about, because I know we're running out of time here, and I'm going to say this at the end of the message as well. If there's anything that comes out of this, go talk with someone about this. If your mind is battling, if lust is there, if pornography is there, go find someone. If you're feeling the shame of this purity culture narrative or this power structure we've talked about, find someone you trust that you can begin to say, I don't know what to do with this. I've got this wound and I need to find some healing. Tammy, I know you would meet with any woman willing to walk that. See, we'd meet with any guys as well. Just this tension there of sometimes you can scrape at a wound and you don't know what to do next.
Yep.
And say it's in community and relationships that we also can find healing for this as well.
Can I just bring us in for a landing? I think several years ago, I read somebody painted a ridiculous scenario. It was a book I was reading. It's a ridiculous scenario of you get trapped in a cabin with your best friend's spouse. I get trapped in a cabin with my best friend's wife. I want be the kind of man. It was a book to men. Be the kind of man who your best friend sleeps well that night because she's with Steve. All is well. Everything's fine. And I realized in those moments, as I read this years ago, I was not that man. I was not the man that you'd be safe with. But I think to all of us, women, be that woman. That no matter what, it's okay. There's trust there, and you're trustworthy. Men, be that man.
Amen.
That is not making the daughters of the Most High King your prey, but making them the women that God intended them to be.
It's good. It's good. Well, good luck. It's going to be a great sermon. I know you're going to do so well. Because at the end of the day, we want to see God's heart and God's heart for marriage and for relationships. And that's a beautiful thing because he is a redeemer of those things. So awesome. Well, thank you guys. And thank you for joining us. Have a great week. Bye-bye.